Well, good evening and welcome to the November 16th Town Center and Library Committee meeting. We have a short agenda, but that will take some time. We're planning on doing another presentation of what our proposal is. But before we do that, we'll take public comment. So Judy, do you have anything that you wanted to say to us before we start?
Not right away. Will there be time to ask questions or make comments as in that second part when you have?
Absolutely. You know, I think what we'd like to do is go through the presentation and then we'll take as long as need be to answer questions. Okay. John, how about you? Did you have anything that you wanted to say before?
For the walk.
Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? A couple of things that I thought would be worth discussing is when do we go to the select board with our formal ask? So just setting a date for that, I would think would be good. And maybe thinking about like you know, how do we do our promotion? You know, where the flyers go,
Right.
how many handouts should we print?
Yeah,
You know, any of that kind of thing.
that's good because the library requested a display in their display case.
Okay,
No,
so we could talk.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
That would definitely be something we should
That
do.
would be worth doing.
Yeah,
Um,
okay.
I don't think I have.
Okay,
Incredible.
Betsy, did you have anything that you wanted to say to us before we start? As far as public comment?
Before we start public comment?
No, well, before we start, we're going to do a
Oh,
presentation.
Public comment.
Yeah, as public comment.
Well, I'm just coming to support the plan
Okay.
and especially I'm happy to see about the energy efficiency improvements that are part of it and
Great.
I'll double that.
Okay. Okay, if I can share my screen. Oh, no, come on.
What are we doing?
Okay.
You do that. You can do this, okay. And I do share screen. That. And they always get this in the way. I don't never know where to put that. It's always in my way. Is there a way to get rid of it?
Taking through to this?
I think you can. I think you can. That little bar at the
That.
bottom on the far left.
And then I can do
There you go.
that. Hey, there we go.
That's good.
Good.
Okay.
So our intent tonight is to go through a presentation we put together to explain what we've learned about this building and what we're proposing to do about what we've learned. Before we start, I think it still is a good idea to introduce ourselves. So if the committee will introduce themselves.
I'm Dave Healy. I live in the village and been on the committee for, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, however long you've been at it.
It seems like longer.
Amy Wardwell. I live on Cochrane Road and I've been on the committee for 2 years now.
Lori Dana, I'm the chair of the library trustees and I've been on the committee since the beginning, 5 years, 4 years, whatever it is.
It's been a long time. And I'm Jeff Forward. I am the current chair of this committee and I'm on the select board. I think this is my 4th or 5th different town center committees. I've been on it from the beginning. So what we wanted to do tonight is give you a little history about what we've learned and where we're going with this, talk about money and next steps and answer any questions that any of you all have. So the step back, this building was, the building we'll be talking about is the one we're sitting in, the town center building. It was originally built in 1907. One of the things I like about this picture is the previous school. It's like right behind it in this picture. It looks like it's like butting up against it.
Yeah.
In 1914, they added the second section of the building, the second half of the building is essentially what it looks like today. What's interesting to me about this particular picture is the timing in 1914. And in 1908, there was a devastating fire downtown that took out the entire commercial block, burned it to the ground, as well as several other buildings. And yet, like a few years later, the town felt that they had the time, the energy, and the money to build what couldn't have been an inexpensive building. And you know, the town has done this repeatedly. It's you know, if you think about 1813 when the round church was built, or 1879 when the Universalist
Yeah.
Church Library was built, the people who lived there at the time invested in the community to create legacy projects. So this is where we are today. This is what we're talking about, is a legacy project. And we want to let you know what we think we can do with this building. So the more recent history is when the elementary school was built up by Camel's Hump, the school district vacated this building. And the town offices, which were in the commercial block, the basement of the Masonic building, moved over here with really very minimal renovations. I don't know how they moved that safe. Somehow they moved that safe, but that was about it. And then they threw some desks into classrooms with what is currently the post office. And then a few years later, the post office, which used to be where the dentist office is now, was looking for more space. And the town submitted a bid to house them that was successful. What that did for us is the post office is a terrific tenant. For one thing, they sign long-term leases. They're very stable. They pay market rates. They pay market rate rent. At that time, I think it was around $50,000. What that enabled the town to do is do renovations on this building for the first floor, where the town clerk's office is. Put in we did a bond to put in the vault and do those renovations, and the rent from the post office essentially paid for those renovations. A little bit later, the school district, the Ctr-Library School District, which was in the second floor of the Masonic temple, they moved into this top floor of the building. And what you see is what they did. They did this renovation. So that was 15, 20 years ago. And then when they left in 2019, that's when this committee was formed. The select board wanted to understand what could be done with this site. You know, even more than just the building, what could be done with this site and what did we need to do for town services? So we did a lot, actually. We did a building assessment to try to find out what the deficiencies were, the deferred maintenance on the building. Breadloft identified quite a few, and that was several years ago. We found more. There are more deficiencies. The bones of the building are pretty good. Roof is good, the walls are good, the foundation is good. And the guts of the building really need work. They haven't really been touched in a very long time. We also did a public outreach process to try to get input from town residents as to what they would want to see, you know, here, either with this building, or we examined whether or not to build a new building on the site or some other site. We looked at all of those things. We tried to figure out what were the highest and best uses of the space for tenants and other occupants, and we came up with I think actually a pretty good process for a criteria for evaluating who should be in this building. More recently, we hired Black River Design as an architectural firm out of Montpelier to kind of help us walk through a more final process. They helped us plan and do conceptual design. And what we were shooting for was enough of a design to be able to put it to a cost estimator estimate how much it would cost, so we could come up essentially with a bond number. You know, and that's where our numbers have come from. The cost estimators had something like 300 different line items. And we had to have enough of a plan for them to be able to do that. And all through this process, this committee has been quite aggressive, ambitious, you know, about trying to find alternative sources of funding for the project. We have lots of ideas on grants and different sources of funding, but nothing we can nail down before we do a bond vote. So the bond vote will be our next big milestone in this project. I think you do this process, right?
So I'm Josh Arneson, town manager. I also work in the building and the town resident. So we wanted to review the current uses. We've touched on some of these already. So on the left, you'll see town services. The town clerk is housed here, as well as the administrative offices, which is mostly finance and myself. We have finance, we have planning and zoning, and the police department is housed here in this building. Tenants include the post office, and then on this floor, MMC TV, Historical Society, and the senior center office. They were added recently after the school moved out, looking for ways to kind of engage with the community and bring in some nonprofits that really serve the community and serve the town. Our community carriage office is actually a recent addition in the last couple of months. They have an office here behind the screen, actually. And then Radiate Art Space has been a tenant in the basement for several years with art classes for the community. The visioning process, we went through this in the spring of 2022, did a lot of outreach to the community. And some of the main takeaways from that was there was a lot of support for maintaining the existing building in the existing location. There was lots of discussion about how convenient it is. It's sort of the heart of the town, with the town clerk, the post office, the library, town services, right in the middle of our main commercial block here on Bridge Street. They also recognize the need for upgrades. We'll get to some of the deficiencies a bit later in the presentation, so I won't go through all of those, but a lot of those were already sort of recognized and known by the community. Very much wanted to be cost conscious, improve the space and functionality, improve energy efficiency, keep a low carbon footprint. Also lots of talk about the windows and window replacement. On the environmental side, there was also a strong desire to keep the current building rather than tear it down and build a new one. That was kind of twofold. One, for the environmental concern of the cost and waste of demolition, and then the cost of rebuilding, and also just a sentimental tie to the building as it's been in town for over 100 years and served a number of uses. We also checked out a building down in Hartford. They have a building that's very similar, as you can see there before and after there on the left and on the right. Within the last 5 or so years, they renovated that building to be a more modern look and feel to that building. And I got to admit, when I first started this process, I was a little skeptical of, well, how's that going to look to redo this building, having worked here a bit and sort of seen up close some of the deficiencies. But I had a chance to visit down to Hartford and walk through that building. And it really feels like a brand new building when you go in there. They've done a great use of the current space. The offices are very nice and crisp and clean. They've got a modern conference room for their select board with a hybrid meeting room, which is hooked up very similar to this, but in a much more modern, sleek way. They've used great use of natural light that comes in. I've spoke with some of the staff that work there both before and after the renovation, and they're extremely happy with the way it came out. So that sort of sold me on the vision for what this building could be with the full renovation.
So another member of this committee is Jake Marin. He works at for Vermont Energy Investment Corporation. He's not well tonight, and we thank him for not coming. He's not feeling well. So I offered to take this section for him. So we found deficiencies with many aspects of the building. One of the ones that really concerned me a great deal was the lack of fresh air ventilation. There is no fresh air ventilation in this building. It is all recirculation. And we learned during the pandemic that fresh air ventilation is very important, you know, for the health and welfare of our employees. Even more recently, today, we had a duct cleaning done down in the town clerk's office. And the reason that we found the duct cleaning is that Linda pointed out to me one day, she says, take a look at this door. And the door that closes on the town clerk's office, if you look at the inside of the door, that on the top of the panels of the door, you can go like this and you get black soot. You know, and you can see where it's coming from the diffusers from the air handler. That's not good, you know. We're addressing it in the short term by cleaning the ducts. There's an air purifier downstairs, but that's just kind of an indication of the working conditions that we have here. And the working conditions matter. They matter for retention of our employees, which we value a lot, and for recruitment. And we've had a lot of difficulties with recruitment in different departments. So we think by making this building new, and we're not replacing it, but we're replacing all of the key components in the building, that this will help with retention, it'll help with recruitment, and it'll address many of these issues. Another one that we learned as we were going through this process is there was no fire alarms in the building. None. So we addressed that, but in a temporary way, you know, and, you know, we didn't want to invest too much money in something that might be ripped out in the not too near distant future. But, you know, those are the kinds of things that we found. The windows are original. These are over 100 years old. It's the only source of fresh air ventilation we have in this building. You can take some of these windows and you can move them back and forth. So you can't really address the ventilation system without addressing the windows, and you can't really address the windows without addressing the heating and ventilating system. Otherwise, you'd be heating the outdoors, or you'd make the building too tight, and it would make the indoor air quality worse. In July, we discovered once again that this building has the potential for flooding. The good news is that we learned that we can use this building. Even though it is in the floodplain, we can use it if we address the potential for flooding. And the ways we would address the potential for flooding is to fill in a pipe trench around the post office, which is below the floodplain, and that's where it tends to flood. But in order to do that, we have to essentially gut the post office, which is actually an expensive part of the project. So this project would address flooding, it would address indoor air quality, it would address climate change. It would make the building more functional for the occupants, and it would utilize the space much better. Some of our offices are too big, some are too small. By rearranging how the workflow works, it would make it a much more functional workspace. Did you want to do this one, Lori? Okay.
I even have notes.
There we go.
So when you look at the this, you can't really read it, but this is option E1. We went through we went through A, B, C, D, and then each of those had 3 or 4 different options. So with the architects, we looked at a lot of different options. The first thing that the architects really did was to interview people about their space needs. Not now, they looked at the current space, but they interviewed people about what would be the optimum space need, not going hog wild, not going, not talking about, fancy things, but just to do their jobs more efficiently. And the colors on this really are indicating the green is all town center, the blue is the post office, the purple is meeting space.
The blue actually is the police.
The police department.
That's
What
the
did I
police.
say?
You said post office.
Oh, yeah, yellow is the post office. And then the purple is meeting spaces and the orange is tenant space at the moment. So that kind of, and this is a conceptual plan. It's not probably the final places for the walls, but at this point, as they were doing the cost estimate, the cost of moving some walls around is not going to really change the cost of the project because most of the cost is in the things Jeff already talked about, the HVAC system and the windows. We will have to come up with a final design when we go out to bid. But right now, this is a concept that we're working on, and this is the concept that the cost estimator used. So some of the big goals, we wanted the town staff to all be on one floor rather than split. The police station has doubled the space, but that is all office space. So should our needs for the police change at some point in the future, that's office space that could be reconfigured for town staff or tenants. That was probably the biggest challenge that the committee had, was trying to figure out what to do with the police department, given the fact that it's been in such flux for pretty much all 4 years that we were meeting. The meeting spaces include a large select board room that actually moves back to the first floor, and a couple of small conference rooms. The elevator stays where it is, and we did look at some options there's some new elevator technology. It would have been very costly because it would have meant a bigger elevator shaft, and our current elevator seems to be working. The mechanicals moved to a space in the back of the post office, so they have to be moved out of the basement. Yep.
Just a quick question. So the elevator goes to the first floor and the second?
Yeah.
Goes to this floor?
Yeah.
It currently goes to the basement as well. Yeah. And then the current metal fire escape that is on the right-hand side of the building becomes an actual enclosed stairwell. We're not sure anybody would really want to go down the fire escape as it exists now. It's pretty rickety. But anyway, it's a lot safer option, and it's a better way to get people out of the building should there be some kind of an emergency.
Yeah, one of the cool things about that secondary egress, that stair tower, is that it provides a functional secondary egress out of the top floor of the building, and it allows us to remove the wall that goes, I think it's this wall, isn't it? Yeah, it's this wall. It goes between the two floors. So originally, when this was a school, the stair was open to the foyer down in front of the town clerk's office. And if you're ever down there, you'll notice it. It's just a big blank wall. And if you remove it, you get to see the tin ceilings, and you get to kind of see how the flow of the building used to work and would work in the future.
And then the re-envisioning of the site plan was kind of one of probably the most exciting things that came out of the work with the architects and the landscape architects. Again, this is conceptual. There's indications of trees and plantings. It's not a final design. And actually, I know there are community members that have opinions and might want to have some say about this. But it's meant to just indicate what it could look like. The site plan actually adds green space along Bridge Street. It adds what's labeled as an event lawn. Oops.
Sorry, excuse me.
It's labeled as the event lawn, which could be used for programming for the library for like kids. We played around with what if we fundraised, for a pavilion, like a covered pavilion there or something, so that community members, we could have events there. It creates a defined crosswalk between the town center and the library, which doesn't exist now. Instead of having to walk across the parking lot and take sort of like watch for cars coming every which way. It moves the handicap parking for the library off of Bridge Street and puts it into the parking lot and creates a new handicap ramp off the parking lot. It's one of those switchback ramps. it places the handicap parking for the post office and town center next to the building instead of being across the actual driving lane for the building. It addresses some stormwater concerns that we had to do in terms of the floodplain issue. And it keeps all 66 parking spaces. So it doesn't decrease the parking, and it just improves the driving flow. If you see what they did, they made, instead of three parallel rows of parking parallel to Bridge Street, it becomes parking along the back and then parking in one long stretch along there. So
They're coming off of Bridge Street, right off of that small, between the two buildings still.
Correct.
yeah, it'd be the same. It's basically the same. It's basically the same driveway that's there, but there would be a crosswalk after you pulled in.
Well, and
a little
there's
bit,
more
and
green
a
space.
Sidewalk.
I was just wondering about that.
There's more green space, so, because there's parking right now, all the way,
Yeah.
where the charging station is, which is
Yeah.
about there.
Right.
Yep, so we would have to move the charging. I
Yeah.
think they just moved it back actually on
We
the
could
other.
put it, back
We
here
could put
or
it anywhere.
somewhere next to the building.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as you can get to the library's electric,
Right. Or maybe even,
or maybe we would change that.
maybe it'd be up front. Maybe that red car is the charger.
I don't know.
So this is my slide. Again, I'm Dave Healy, and I've been fortunate enough to be on the committee with people who know the town, know the site, know energy efficiency, and have been really thoughtful about construction. I help nonprofits through the construction process, mostly healthcare, for a living. So I get to talk about how we get to such a big number, and does it actually make sense? And I was initially going to talk about each area a little bit, but Jeff and Lori did such a nice job. I'm going to try to stay out of the weeds, and during the Q&A we could talk more as necessary. The site work that you see at 1.1 million that Lori just talked about, all the good things like improving handicapped access to the library, making safer transmission between the two buildings, and the potential common space for kids and activities comes to 1.1. The building construction, all the nice things that Jeff talked about, like improving the HVAC, life safety improvements, historical restoration, energy efficiency. The bricks and mortars things that you would think of, 4.1. The post office roof, which is integral to potential solar installation in the future, and the flood mitigation that was addressed, 1.2. Markup, insurance, and bonds. We very likely will use a construction manager. They're any construction manager, and you'll bid this, but their cost of construction plus a markup, and all the subs have built-in profit and overhead and profit, but that they're typically a couple of percent. You have builder's risk insurance. I'm sorry, that's over in the soft cost side. Your contractors have their insurance and bonds, which our cost estimator detailed out at 763. So the sub total of construction of 7.2 million. Keep that on the screen and in your mind for a second. 15% contingency you really need to plan on, because in any renovation, and I'm a fan of renovations because you're not developing site utilities, you're not building new structure, but you are peeling back the proverbial onion, and there will be things that come up that the contractor couldn't see.
Always.
And so you need to be prepared for to make that payment, and it's only fair. The other thing is best architects and engineers in the world aren't perfect because they're people. And I've been through this a couple times recently. 5% margin of error in your design documents is considered fair and normal. So you need to be prepared and have some money set aside for that. So the 15% contingency is a little over $1 million. There's fees, everything from the state fire marshal, included in fees, architect fees, engineering fees. Get it done right with good professionals costs money. Clerk of the works, I typically use owner's rep, but let's use that interchangeably for now. The town is going to need somebody to help them through this process. Josh, it would be, all eyes are going to turn to Josh with 101 questions when this project does come to pass. But in fact, his job is to help the town run, not town take on a major project. And this is a fairly major project. And so this person will help with the coordination, will know the design documents intimately, will answer questions for the contractors when they have it, will do the communication on when certain things are going to shut down, and do a lot of coordination, and as well as quality control would be their role. The building envelope commissioning, the HVAC system, and the way it interacts with the fresh air and the overall overall project end product. You need to have a third party really testing. It's common and good practice to have them run a system through its process and prove it. And they're kind of the whip behind the contractors in the mechanical world. And I always say, if I had it to do over again, I'd be a mechanical engineer, because it's full employment. There is always stuff with mechanical systems that need to be attended to, and the commission agents drive that number down and make occupancy a lot more comfortable when you do move back in. Miscellaneous costs, the bid process, moving to storage. One of the downsides of renovation is that the people that are here now can't be here now when we tear down the ceilings. And so they're going to need to go someplace, whether it's modular buildings in the parking lot or elsewhere, but preparing for that cost. And then the builder's risk insurance, which when you're building, you get into a different category of insurance, and it's not unusual for the project to capture that cost. So that's detailed out at a little over 100,000. And then the inflation allowance never used to be in projects before, but over the last 3 to 5 years, it is good practice to put an inflation allowance. And our consultants, Black River, that helped us with this, recommend we do so. And frankly, it's a good idea. And then basically the COVID and the Ukraine shocks to the building construction market has driven prices and made things more volatile. And hopefully things have settled down. They seem to have. I had a project 18 months ago, almost 2 years ago, unfortunately now, that went up 10% in 3 months because we hit it just at the wrong time. And so 7.5% is I think a pretty fair number. So those soft costs at 2.5 and change bring our total project budget to 9.841,603. The last couple things I'd like to say is one of the things that I do in my professional and my personal life, like when I bought our first house 20 odd years ago, is something that architects aren't crazy about and builders hate. But I like to distill stuff to a square foot cost, because just gives you a baseline. And if you strip out some of our soft costs, like the inflation allowance, we're in the kind of 450 a square foot range. And then if you add the whole, and take out the site, you could take out the site work too, so plus or minus 400. If you put all in, we're a little under 500. If you compare that to the Hartford, and Waterbury did a renovation also a few years ago, we're in line with their cost plus inflation. So for me, this project passes the sniff test. I think it makes sense financially, and I also think it makes sense from an environmental perspective, which is something I value. And in the end, it's a lot of money. I do think that it's the right thing for this town. I think the need's not going to go away, and I'm not sure the price is going to get any more attractive over time. In the end, for me, it's one of those things that the town needs to grapple with. I think where we should build it, what we should do, and why we need to do it have been answered. I think that how are we going to do it and when are we going to do it are what we're talking about today. So, I mean, we need people to understand the first three, but I think if you understand that, then it's a question of when and how. So,
So, I think that, the committee has put a lot of work into this to try to get us to this point. And we recognize that it's a substantial, we were shocked when we got this number. However, it is kind of what it is. We looked to try to see if we could minimize these costs. And we couldn't figure that out. There are things that we must do. And if we're going to be doing HVAC and ripping out the ceilings, you really should do the lighting. You really should do the sprinkler system. You really should do the guts of the building. And you can't do the HVAC system without dealing with the window. So it's all interrelated. We had, some of those options that Lori talked about. We had some that would have been considerably more expensive than this. We had built another building on this lot, or if we had added an addition, it would have added millions to this project. So we recognize that, it's $96 per $100,000 worth of valuation of your house for the first year. And it'll decline because that's the way the bond works. It fixed principal payment, declining interest payment. We know that that's a lot. So this is our best shot at it, and we know it's up to the voters to decide whether they can do that, whether they feel that they can afford to do that.
Just out of curiosity, if the townspeople approve this, how many years do you think it's going to take to do these renovations if it went through?
Probably a year,
A year?
What, I would expect the construction drawings, if it's approved in March, I would expect the construction drawings by the end of summer or so, something like that. And put out to bid, and then construction would take a year from there.
So you've already got the construction company lined up and everything?
Oh,
No,
no.
I mean, there's no way of knowing,
not.
there's no way of knowing at the moment. And it could be a completely different construction climate a year from now, better or worse. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
But it's not going to get cheaper.
No.
If we
No.
put it off, it won't get cheaper. We've tried to find, we've actually applied for some of these grant opportunities. And we were almost successful with the congressional discretionary spending
Yeah.
grant. And it fell off the table at the last minute.
They
And,
still haven't approved a budget, so,
right, so, counting on Congress, might not be
They
Yeah,
just out of
prudent.
Congress, so that hurts
yeah.
a lot.
we will continue to try to do this through this process, is look for other funding processes.
Yeah.
But we have to bond for the entire amount. And then the bond, how much we ultimately borrow would be reduced by any kind of grant funding or alternative financing that we can find.
So ARPA couldn't be used for a portion of it.
Yeah, I think it could, so, one hope I had, I presented to the select board last month or so would be to use reserve funds for the solar piece of this, for example. And then that wouldn't have to be, it's not in the bond amount that we have right here, but it could be added. As Dave mentioned, we included reinforcing the rafters on the post office and insulation for snow load so that it could accommodate solar. Solar would add another maybe $300,000 to the project. So that's, by taking that out, it brought us down below 10 million.
A
little bit.
And there might,
Lights are gonna be LEDs.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
They don't even, I thought in January, these filaments are,
You can't buy them anymore.
can't buy them anymore.
Yeah, right. So yes, they would be LEDs. They'd all be the same color, which would be nice.
If you sit here and look around this room and you see the ceiling, you see the lighting, you see the
Stage.
windows, we have a drop ceiling, the historical windows go above it, all the interior finishes, the painted wood, I'm not the architect, but it could be a natural varnished wood. I mean, this room, if it stayed the way it was, could really sing,
Yeah.
It doesn't now. And I'm not saying that that's, a terrible thing and this room doesn't serve its function, but this room could be beautiful.
Mhm.
And it will be
Mhm.
if and when if and when a renovation happens. And
Hardwood floor. So the next steps, we're doing a series of tours of the buildings. We're doing one on Saturday. We're doing a couple during the book sale. We'll go to the select board next month with the final ask. It'll, with the final ask for the number to be put on the warning for town meeting. After that's set, we'll do more informational meetings so that our intent is to be as transparent as possible, and to answer as many questions as possible.
So, and we can't predict now, but once, assuming that the bond goes through and the work happens, there will be savings, energy savings.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully they're gonna add up to something over time.
That solar, what I projected the solar, we think we can fit about 60 kilowatts of solar panels on this portion of the building and the post office. And that would offset about $10,000 worth of electricity costs per year. So that's not nothing, that counts.
And just improving the windows and the insulation in the walls is gonna be an
Yeah.
energy saving,
The way-
harder to measure, but
Well,
still savings.
and the heat pumps will be much more efficient. We are proposing eliminating the natural gas boiler. And so we would be totally electrically heated. Those solar panels would cover about 2/3 of our projected electricity load.
Mhm.
That's as much as we could get on this building.
And we did talk about zoning the heat so that, for example, the post office that has different hours
Mhm.
is a zone. The meeting room, the select board meeting room is separate because the meetings are at night, but you don't have to heat the whole building to have your evening meetings. So that kind of thing, which is also a savings, which doesn't happen now.
Right.
It's kind of,
There are actually really no controls in this building right now. This has been a really good committee. We've had really good people working on this committee, all through the process, including several, select board members.
Mhm.
So that's the question that's before us is,
Mhm.
where do we go from here? Is this our time? Is this our time for a legacy project,
Mhm.
for the town? And we're ready with any questions you might have.
Mhm.
If anybody comes up here.
Mhm.
I don't need to share anymore. Do I
Mhm.
stop share? There we go. Okay. So that's what we've got. And we will do this, presentations several more times.
Mhm.
And I think it's fair to say we're happy to answer questions.
Yep.
But Judy, did you have a question that you wanted that you were prepared to ask us?
I have more a comment or question. You mentioned that the final floor plan will be determined when it goes out to bid, which means that's after the bond vote.
That's correct.
And also you have mentioned before that the final tenants would be up to the select board or might be determined later. And I'm fine, there is no final tenants because tenants change over the years, but we do have current tenants. I feel that a lot of people in the town would not want to vote or would have a hard time voting if they didn't know how the building was going to be used or how the current plan, what you plan to put in it, So I think that the select board and you can't do it right now, but I think before the vote, you've got to have that. You don't have to have the walls because you might not have the architects right then, but I think you've got to have a plan. That's just my thought that people want to know how it's going to be used.
Fair point.
And, I also, I guess I should have started before that. I really want to thank you all for doing the work that you do. And I 100% support this plan for the safety and the health issues and the efficiency of the building and the heating and ventilating, that whole package. And to see the building, sort of be healthy again and come to life. I'm going to play devil's advocate here just a little bit. If you accept me, I don't want to be too critical, but I'm imagining people looking at the site works part and say, you're going to spend $1 million to dig up a parking lot that has 66 spots. You're going to plant some trees in it, and then you're going to have 66 spots. You're going to have a little bit more green space. You're going to be walking across. There is a safe path to the library now. People just like to cut this straight across. You can just walk, 20 steps down, and then you walk across by the flagpole, and then you walk up. I think that project that to get, and they're going to say, and you get one more little patch of green. Well, we have the nice space behind the library. We got the space on the side of the building. We have green space. We got volunteers green just on the other side of the town. And if we wanted to plant 17 more trees, there are lots of places in town where we can plant more trees. You say, well, we're going to reconfigure it and we're not going to lose any parking spaces, but Richmond is not in a position to consider losing them. It would be nice to find more. And if we can reconfigure it and add trees and still have the same amount, it'd be neat to be able to reconfigure it and have maybe 20 more parking spaces if that can work. So and the other thing is that if we did decide to do site work, it could be done at another time. It's not part of the building as such. It's the building sort of has to all be done at once because you're tearing it apart and you got to put it back together. But the site work does not have to be done. And it might even make it easier to get all the construction done if you're not trying to do site work at the same time. Or it might be a good place if you're not working on the parking lot. It might be helpful to be able to have, if you're going to have trailers or whatever you're going to have for the post office or something, you might be nice to have that space available. So thank you again. And I just when I just saw that's about 16% of the whole budget would be for the site works.
You're very perceptive.
Yeah.
That's probably that's the one piece of this project that's probably discretionary. About half of the amount that we have in here for site work would be for necessary work with the ADA compliance and with flood and stormwater management. But you're right. So, almost everything that we presented has been either must do or should do. The site work, at least half of the site work, is a could do. And, I think that's open for discussion. Does anybody else want to respond to that?
I was surprised to see site work, the first thing listed there in the budget, because it's the last thing that should be done after all the construction is done and all the trucks and everything
Yeah.
have gotten out of there.
Yeah.
You have to
Fix
see
that.
what you have left for money,
Yeah.
then you can do it.
It's,
I understand for the flood part, and for the have HVAC, you gotta have that kind of stuff outside.
you're absolutely right. The architect originally created that budget and then we tweaked it. And the architects, because in drawings and in the various sections of construction documents, civil goes first. And that's the only reason why it's there, I'm pretty sure. But you're right, that
It
should drop
shouldn't be the
down.
first thing, yeah.
We will
Yeah.
change that in our presentation.
Yeah.
And Judy, I do appreciate we had this discussion in the committee. Being the person that's the library chair, that's one of the more exciting parts of it for me. But there is also potential for some money from library grants that could address some of those issues, like the handicapped ramp,
Yeah.
for example, could be a project. So yeah.
I also, one of the things that excites me is looking at this property as a campus rather than two separate buildings. And so the site work, I think it has a lot of appeal, but it also has it has a price tag. So I think it's great feedback.
Yeah.
And
The other thing, my son has spent a lot of time at Radiate, and been a Radiate fan for a number of years, and I know that's near and dear to your heart, and it's been part of our conversation, and we struggle with it, and we should continue to talk about it. And I think your input that the people want to know what's going to go in here, and essentially what's going to go in here is our community groups. And right now there is Radiates on the knife's edge, and so I think if there's a way that we can continue that conversation and resolve that, hopefully for the good, before the bond vote, I think we'd be in a much better spot. But
I hope that we can begin to consider, maybe it should be called Richmond Community Art Space instead of Radiate Art Space, but I wish we could begin to consider it a space for the arts, for recreation. We provide all these fields and we mow them, and then the volunteers run the rec department. Well, we have a space for the arts in Richmond, and the volunteers spend a lot of time running that too. And just like people have to pay a little bit for some of the rec programs, people have to pay a little bit for some of the art programs, but we do have financial aid. So I just wish that the town would begin to consider arts part of the recreation, and that it's a small space. If we can give it a small space, the arts deserve it too. So thank you. And I'd love to talk to you more about that anytime, but I think
when are we discussing that? We actually are discussing this at the select board level in December, right? It's in our December.
Darcy Rankin is doing a presentation Monday, November 20th, I think it is. There are actually some people even feeling more strongly than I do about this. And I mean, I guess you can't feel too much more strongly, but anyway, Darcy Rankin is going to do a presentation because at your last meeting, or one of your last meetings, you said that it was up to the select board to make the decision of who the tenants were. And so we did go, or Darcy did go to the Christy Witters did go to the select board and talk to Josh about getting on the agenda for November 20th.
Okay, so I think it's a fair comment that we punted. The two issues that we punted on as far as making decisions, because we didn't feel it was entirely our place to make decisions on, was the police situation. It was more than just space. The police situation, it's in flux, and we don't know where that's going to go. What we tried to do is accommodate enough space for a police department. You know,
Right.
I
The
think,
police department wish list included a lot more items on it. The original list had a Sally Port, a holding cell, processing center, separate entrance.
another 2,000 square feet
And
someplace.
there
that we
was
couldn't
no
fit.
way to do that in the existing building. There would have had to be an addition to accommodate all that. So
And-
we did talk to the select board, I think, about that.
And I think as far as tenants go, we went through this process early on about, you know, we had lots of empty space. And so like, you know, who should come in this empty space? And where we are right now is where we landed at that time. And instead of deciding what exactly, we came up with a criteria process for the select board to consider. And I think that's what we would recommend now.
But Radiate certainly fits the criteria.
They do,
As a nonprofit who's serving the community,
they
which was
do,
our,
you know,
after the town and the post office. I think that was our next group, which nonprofits who were serving the Richmond community.
so what we tried to fit as many tenants as we could in this space. This is one configuration. It could be a different configuration. And ultimately, you know, I think we felt that the select board does have the ultimate decision on what that should be. So I think, you know, you're going in the right direction of getting on the select board agenda and having it as a discussion item there. We're trying to bring a cost. You know, our drive has been to come up with, you know, what's a reasonable cost for things that must be done to this building. And I think that's where we've landed.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Is it critical that the Radiate Art be in the town center if we could find another place for it within the community?
That's
Um,
certainly.
Well,
What do you
it's a very wonderful space in the sense that the bus goes right by. The bus from Huntington can bring kids, buses can drop kids after school. It's very central because we also feel that we're very connected to the town. When we did the This is Richmond art project, the paintings that you see when you first enter the building. We feel very connected to the building. We feel very connected to the building with the town center murals that are on the outside of the building. We worked with the select board 3 or 4 years ago to become the curators of those murals. And each year we find a new theme, and the community finds painters and artists that work together on that. So we feel very connected to the building, and we feel very connected to a central space like this. But we also don't need all the space that we have there to do 80% of our programs. And I'd be happy to talk to, I think what you got for a wish list, what you got first for needs was closer to a wish list as opposed to our absolute needs. And I don't know what the time, when the time would be to talk about what those actual needs are, but I would be happy to talk to anyone.
Okay, I think, John, did you have a question for Judy?
I was just wondering, there's an open space that just on Bridge Street. That place right there, that the flower shop.
That's
just
true.
opened up.
Yeah.
You know, it's on Bridge Street. It's in the main area. Not the
Mhm.
greatest it's to cross or anything, but
Mhm.
it's a possibility. You know, maybe.
So one thing that's different about Radiate, and we did talk about the art program a lot on this committee, I think it's fair to say. And it pains us that we have not been able to find a good solution for it. Where it is now, it's really not viable. It's not viable because of the floodplain issues, that we cannot have the basement used as occupied space. And frankly, the ADA access piece really bothers me. You know, it's limited access. While the elevator goes down there, it doesn't go in a place that could get you to Radiate. So it does have limited access, handicapped access. So it's not great space to begin with. It looks lovely. You know, what they've done with it is really it's so much better than what was there before. It was it really is something, but so we have not come up with a viable solution for that. It is somewhat different than every other use in the building. Every other use of the building is class 1 office space. And Radiate would be program space, which is different than every other use. So, you know, I think you're right. I think it's a political question. You know, would there be more support for this project with the art program included or not? You know, several of the iterations that we had for this project included all of the tenants that we have now, and they were several $1 million more than this project.
Yeah.
So we haven't been able to figure it out.
So Jeff, let's game it out just slightly. So if the select board says that a community art space is a valued program that should if at all possible, be situated in this building. So we, as the committee, get that directive from the select board.
Yep.
Do we then go back and we work with the current organization that's helping with community art, and they say, you know, we go through a programming exercise that says they need 250 square feet, or, you know, they need 75 square feet of storage and X, Y, Z of space, you know, at various times of the day. Do we then go through another exercise with our architect
I think so.
and then see what we can take, what blocks we can move around, and then see what impact that might have on cost?
Yep.
And then we're able to come back at this and, you know, with this slightly modified cost estimate and schematic design.
I think
right?
that is possible, you know, and you know, I think that's what we would need direction from the select board to do that.
We would
You know-
likely need to maybe have another, I don't know if we've exhausted our Black River funding and whether they would.
They
need
could do this. It's
more.
not-
We
They would
might need to re-up a little bit with that, for sure. Yeah.
We're far enough along down this road that would be worth doing too.
I think it's a good idea that they're going to the select board then on Monday, because we have to have a number.
We have to have.
We have to have a number in December because the bond vote.
Might not
before that
change,
has to
it might not
happen.
change all that much. I
It
mean,
might,
if we're taking.
Yeah.
It might change what we present.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Jeff,
we would
know
need to go
that.
through that process, exactly.
Jeff, when you said that it's not an office space, but a program space, does that have any implications for the building? Because the way I see it, it was all program space when it was a school, and the ventilation is going to be improved. There's the only thing I see is that we would rather have a moppable linoleum floor or something instead of a carpet, and maybe a sink if it worked, or some way to, a utility sink rather than washing your brushes in the bathroom. But I just wondered whether you saw that there in the distinction that you made, whether there was some other distinction that would
So,
have ramifications.
So if you look at the other tenants, the so-called tenants in the building, our community cares, the historical society, the senior center. If they were to leave, go someplace else, or the program no longer existed, they'd move their desks out and you could move somebody else in and you wouldn't have to change it. Program space is somewhat different. I mean, there's no other use of the building that brings children into the building, which, some people will see that as an advantage and some people will see it as a disadvantage. So I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
you could, so another way to think about it is that we've got 3 or 4 current tenants right now. They don't have to be the same tenant. It could be different tenants that we have, I mean, if you consider Radiate a potential tenant of the building. So, MMCTV is a big space, and right now we're allocating quite a bit of space for them. They may or may not need that much space. We haven't done a lot of design work with them. Maybe their space could be different. I don't know. But if we were instructed by the select board to revisit this issue, we would, and we would work with the architect to try to come up with a solution. And this committee has been very good at coming up with solutions for problems that we've had. So that's a possibility.
That's
So
his
you
question.
brought up MMCTV, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they used to be at the building up at the corner.
Yeah, the John's Shoe Shop, right?
Parapet.
Where Arabesque is now. And were they up on the second floor of that building?
No,
Oh,
I
they're
think
on
they
the
were on the
first floor,
first floor.
I
They
think.
were in one half of the building.
So when Arabesque came in, they had to go out, or did they share that first floor?
They really liked moving in here because it did give them a lot more space.
Okay.
So they're much more comfortable here.
And there has been an advantage for the town of having them here, especially during COVID, because they were the ones that were able to figure out this whole hybrid thing and put in the cameras, and they record there is they're tenants and they're paying rent, but they're also giving back in services to the town as well.
They're paying a considerable amount of rent. They're paying, I think it's about $15,000 a year, something like that. Something like that. They get their revenue from, and they could go away. I mean, it's a little tenuous. They get their revenue from a surcharge on cable television. How many people have cable television or will have cable television in 10 years?
Yeah.
It's actually, to me, an interesting feature of the whole building. So obviously you have the town offices, they're not paying rent. You have nonprofits that are or are not paying rent. You have the federal government here who's paying a lot of rent, and so there's a lot embedded in that, and I'm not sure I have the right answers, but it is what it is right now. So, some nonprofits, like the Historical Society, they in many ways pay as a service. Their rent is low or no.
I don't think we pay.
But they're paying to the town, they would argue, and properly, that they pay to the town in their maintenance of the round church, right? Anyway, it is another wrinkle to this whole thing.
Yeah, the only difference I see with your program is everybody else is pretty much using their spaces as office space. They're not hosting members of the public to come in.
Yeah, even
and
the
do
senior
things.
center.
So the only cost I could see that we might want to, if we had an art space, would just be maybe some soundproofing work to help with, having having groups of children or adults who can be loud. um, Working in
That's
the building.
interesting. I know that the MCTV has had children's workshops in the summer and sometimes during vacation. I was wondering whether the sound and the noise, because so there were children in the building then to do those programs. I was wondering whether that had any effect.
Had some comments about how loud it was in her office.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
it would be a consideration,
Yeah.
so, we didn't really want to make those decisions.
Yeah.
This committee did not want to make those decisions. So, we did talk about how the building could change over 5 or 10 years. Is the post office even going to be around in 10 years? Who knows,
Yeah.
yes, no, maybe not. We have when's our lease up anyway?
Post office?
For the post
I
office,
think it's another 5 years.
another 5 years. I think they have 5-year extensions. We might want to renegotiate that.
There was an extension that literally like just kicked in. So,
Yeah. Anyway, I like that, Judy, just to wrap up with Judy, I do think that after you present to the select board, they
Right.
should be in a position to
Yeah, so,
kind of weigh in on this and give us more direction.
yeah, so I'll mention this on Saturdays. On Saturday, we're doing a tour of the building with the select board. So they can understand what the deficiencies are and then we'll do this presentation for them. And definitely bring it up as something for them to chew on over the weekend, prior to your meeting on Monday. And we'll see.
Lisa has a hand up.
In that
Thank you.
case, until we hear from the select board.
Yeah. And I do not choose to speak for the select board. Lisa,
So, Lisa,
do you have a question?
Hang on, I gotta find video and sound. Okay, well, I don't have the video on. Okay, Jeff, what's the lifespan of the improvements that we're making to the building? And actually the lifespan of the rest of the lifespan of the building as it is, whatever the architects say.
I would argue that this is the most significant renovation that this building has had since it was built, and it lasted 100 years. So
Okay,
our charge, when we first started, all the way through this process, we were thinking for the long term, 30, 50, 100 years. We felt that this, if we're going to do it, we should do it right. Not do it piecemeal and not or halfway. And that was the direction we got from the select board, and that's what we are presenting. The voters might think differently, but that's what we think is the best thing to do.
I think especially after you get through it, you really wouldn't want to do it all over again very soon.
Be very hard.
No.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of work, you're right, but well planned. I mean, I'm impressed. You've thought about, all the major functions and you've thought about details of those. Will there be 21st century communications gear? I mean, wireways, you've got cable, fiber optic maybe, and so forth. I don't know.
Who knows? Are they, Dave, are they putting in Cat5 cable now everywhere or not? Or is that obsolete?
They still do.
Yeah.
Well, at least in my world.
Yeah.
Because they do, but
Yeah.
it's migrating to wireless more and more.
Okay. Even better.
The kind of decisions that we will want to make as we're doing construction. It's the only time that you would do it. You wouldn't want to do it.
well, that
Piecemeal.
should be part of the final.
Right.
There's a lot of details that are gonna have to be decided for the final drawings.
Right.
Then you're getting into
Mhm.
purposes and finishes and. all
But I
of
remember
that.
when they used to, it was very common to have cable
Yeah.
in every room.
My house has 3 rooms with cable.
There you go.
connections in it.
And then,
And we don't use cable and we haven't used cable for 4 years.
but the only time you want to put it in is when you're doing major
Oh, yeah.
renovation. It's much harder to do after the fact.
But
Yeah.
Lisa, I think, I at least think is in kind of the 30 to 50, probably 40 to 50 year increment for a renovation of this size. I
Okay.
mean, with with a little luck, the structure's still here in 100 years.
Seems like, yeah, I mean, it's withstood who knows what. I mean, everything that we've already seen, so it's still here. So pretty rough. Pretty tough.
Including 1927,
Right.
when took out part of the foundation in 1927.
So, I think we see it as having, the lifespan of a new building. If we torn this building down and built a new building, this would have the same lifespan.
Okay. It's
No,
got a
now-
lot more character, twice the character, I think.
Mhm.
Wow. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
And just thinking on the health and safety aspect of it, I can imagine that you might get some pushback from people about taking out the current heating system because
Yep.
it still has, I don't know how many years of expected and putting in the heat pumps.
Josh is laughing because you guys.
I'm looking at Amy, who probably hears from Duncan every
My
night. about
husband who
the-
works in the building has lots of thoughts about the heat system or lack thereof.
Yeah, it has its own challenges and,
Okay.
and it doesn't work seamlessly. to say the
Okay,
yeah.
least.
But in terms of health and safety, I mean, if it all goes through and that system's removed, you probably don't have to worry about carbon monoxide poisoning
Right.
or,
Yep.
or fossil fuel, any fossil fuel related, problems.
It was a comment that we heard, in our visioning process is, energy efficiency and carbon reduction, were common comments that we had. That was stressed. I think you're right. I think there will be people who will, see that as a detriment, that we're not reusing, equipment that's not at the end of its useful life. It's about halfway. It's about what, 8, 10 years, maybe, something like that. Boilers last.
But if it's already
20.
not functioning,
Right.
I mean, if it's
Yeah.
causing more problems than it's working, then it doesn't really matter how old.
And we
it
have to
is.
move, we would have to move it anyways. So we'd have to take it out and put it someplace else anyways. And would you take it out, take this older piece of equipment out and then reinstall it? I don't know. Or would you want to do a new one if you were going to do a new one? So the choice of going
Yeah.
between, a natural gas boiler or a heat pump.
Yeah.
Many people are trying to get away from fossil fuels.
Well, I'm very supportive of that, of doing it with heat pumps.
Okay.
Jeff knows, but I live just up the Jericho Road a little ways and I have solar on my roof and my house was built in 1907, same year that it's original.
Is it really? I didn't realize that.
1907. And so I have solar and I heat with heat pumps and I haven't paid an electric bill in a long time.
A net zero house.
Mhm.
I'm assuming that your Rich is on.
I
It's,
don't know who Rich is.
Rich, did you have any comments that you wanted to make?
No.
Okay,
It is my husband.
okay.
For the minute, I should ask.
You know how to spell his name?
I think I do.
Okay, so I think that concludes our presentation. Thank you all for coming. I can't stress how useful it is, even though we only have a few people here. Having people ask us questions, it's really helpful to us. I've hoped we've been able to address your questions, whether we've answered them the way you like or not. I hope we have been able to address them. So we had a couple of other things to talk about. One is when to do the final ask. When's our next meeting
20th. Oh, next meeting for this committee?
for this?
Sorry.
That would
Saturday.
be,
Have we said it?
Well,
It'll be,
Saturday.
it'll be the 30th of November before the December 4th select board meeting.
Why we meet
What
a lot
time's the Saturday
So that's
then
2
again?
weeks, right? So
12 to 1:30, I think.
and in the meantime,
That's
the
the
select board will be.
so we will have something to discuss, right? We will have something to discuss.
We might want to be on the December 4th meeting for the select board. I mean, I don't know if that's too quick, but we're just thinking in order to get a bond vote by March, we're gonna need sort of a number from the select board, then go get the paperwork from the attorneys. So like, we don't want to wait too long.
And
Right.
the
Take a couple
wording,
meetings.
doesn't it? Yeah, the attorney has to review the language.
So
right?
should
They
we,
write it all and then, yeah.
And then the select board approves it.
Then the board approves. And sometimes there's questions or changes by the board when they see the bond paperwork, not all the time, or sometimes they'll say, well, what's going on here? So it's best to have a little bit of a buffer.
Mhm.
And
So-
really by mid-January, we have to be
We
done.
could
for Linda.
tentatively be on December 4th,
it would seem,
unless they're sending us back to
Right.
rework the floor plan.
If we have to rework the floor plan, it'll get a little bit more challenging.
and we do have we have 3 meetings in December.
Yeah, we will probably, I mean, that's a good point. There's a budget meeting on December. So we'll have a December 4th select board meeting, a budget meeting on the 11th, which if we needed to, we could probably use part of that for this, just because it's sort of time sensitive. And there was, well, we'll have the 18th, and there was talk about maybe a budget meeting on the 19th. So December could be a very busy select board meeting month.
So,
So our next meeting is the 30th.
the 30th,
Do we want to have a meeting?
why don't we see?
Next week's
No,
not.
next
No,
week.
because it's Thanksgiving.
Oh, Thanksgiving.
You want to bring turkey?
Okay.
Everyone will be out.
No,
I don't think we need to.
Okay.
I think that the select board is going to get an earful by coming and doing a tour. And then, this will be
And
a
radiate
discussion.
talking on Monday will be important, so.
I can't predict whether or not there'll be a decision
Mhm.
at that point, maybe, and the decision might be, go back and look at this. Or it might be, we don't want to, that's a possible. So,
I know that Christie can be very persuasive.
she can be very persuasive and she has very strong feelings on this. This is true. This is true.
If she's presenting.
She has strong feelings on this. Which is fine,
No, we need to this is,
but, this was part
It's-
of our
Yeah.
plan really was to go and have as much of a public discussion about what we should be talking about with for the bond vote before it's fixed in stone.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
let's plan on meeting on the 30th.
Mhm,
If
for sure.
and we'll see what our marching orders are. And then we can decide at that meeting when we need to come back to the select board.
Because at some point we need to discuss the whole site plan question that
Yep.
Judy brought up, I think, as a committee.
So
that
right now,
Should be on the agenda.
so that
Yeah,
should be
I was
on the
just thinking
agenda.
the
So
same thing.
it's a fair question. It's like,
like
we have
question
talked
mark.
about that in the past. Should we be including the site work component of this within this bond vote or not? The difference is
Mhm.
9.8 million or 9.2 million. And the question would be, because it's about half of what the
It's that much,
site-
huh?
yeah. That's what they told me. It's
Okay.
something on that order. So
And what does it make? So the tax rate, it only probably takes it from 96 to 93
yeah. So
dollars about
so the political
Yeah.
question is would you gain more votes by going down, that much? Which we have come down, which we have reworked many of these, like Lori was saying, we've looked at at least eight or 10 different plans. And
I
this,
hate to have seen a cost estimate for some of them.
and some of them would have been quite a bit more expensive. Lisa, did you have one final comment?
Yeah, just judging with how Pete's crew has done around the town with other public works things, sidewalks and so forth, would that, since there's not exactly a time schedule for that, would that be good work for them, for the road crew? I mean, you don't have to answer that, but I just want to throw it out. They've shown some real proficiency at doing things like that.
It's more than just paving.
Yeah, I doubt it. So
Yeah.
what Pete has said in the past is he
Mhm.
doesn't do new sidewalks.
Ah,
He'll
okay.
he'll rebuild existing sidewalks.
Okay.
So even the sidewalk that's proposed for Bridge Street, he does not want it to do.
Okay,
So I don't think he could probably do much
no
on
problem.
the sidewalk here.
Mm,
And you'd want it all as part of the general contract anyways.
mm.
Okay, and handouts. Should we just go with what you've got and maybe change
We
the
should
order of
move
site work?
site work. That was a
Change the order of
very,
that?
that was a very good comment.
So I could do that,
Yeah.
and why don't I gave the select board this one.
Yeah,
That I think will be okay for the select
That's,
board.
I think that's good enough for discussion purposes.
and then in the.
I think we should
dis-
have some for the book sale.
Oh, yeah, and actually what we talked about, I met with the libraries, the trustees met with the library staff yesterday. And we could do a display with this size, this stuff in the display case,
Okay,
along with just some language and have some of those,
that would be,
you
that
know,
would be excellent.
those information sheets.
We could
and
do
that-
more of these too,
and
but
that-
you don't have really room for all. of
Well, that's why I was thinking, and then it could be up during the book sale.
this. Oh, that would be awesome. That'd be
So,
great.
you know, if they don't get over here for the tour, or we could put a poster, interested in this, we're doing tours at 10 and, just promote it a little bit
So
for
I've
the
got,
library.
I've got one with the key on it.
Oh, good.
Okay, I'll send that to you.
Yeah, because
Okay.
I don't think that one, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't.
I'll
have the
make,
key
I'll
on.
make the changes to the,
Moving the site work down and
Yeah.
stuff.
yeah, and
Can you substitute those in the little packet, Josh? Or do you need it to be scanned again into one PDF?
You're just talking with the, no, I have to,
Budget slide.
if you just give me the
budget
budget
page
slide, I
would
can slide that
change.
out and put it into the PDF. No
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah,
okay, I'll make those
Yep.
changes. We really, I don't think we need them before. Well, it wouldn't be bad to have a handful at our Monday
Saturday.
meeting in case anybody shows up. I've been handing them out, I've been,
yeah.
I,
It would be nice to have them for Saturday.
yeah,
Really
Like
good Sunday.
a dozen.
Yeah. I don't know how many people show up on Saturday.
I can make it.
Where did you put those ones in color out?
I
You put
printed them at
those-
Staples,
Okay,
and it's just easy because we got the big counters and that one.
Yeah.
So on the next agenda, we'll put the site work, the art space, the results of the select board response, and then
Why don't I try to do that? So why don't I try, I'll print up a dozen of
11:30.
these at Staples tomorrow or
Yeah.
Saturday, just to have as handouts.
Are you going to take a tour with the select board first and then come up and do the presentation? So like 12 to 12:30 a
Yeah,
tour
that would be
and then
fine. Yeah.
12:30 the
12:30 or
presentation.
so would be fine. Yeah.
And it is open to anybody else from the
Yeah,
public who wants to be here too. so-
Yeah.
Jeff, I'm just
And it's gonna be video.
curious
Oh.
about my timing. So if I were down here at 12:30, you think that'll work
It would
or?
work.
Yeah,
Okay. I'm just really tight these
Yeah,
days.
yeah. And
I might come for the tour, but yeah.
I'd like to say this publicly once again, that you guys have really been mentioned. You really have stuck with this project all through, and
Now we have to see it through to the end.
we'll have to see it through.
Exactly.
So is there anything else we need to discuss? Any other business? We can adjourn.
I think so.
No,
Thank you so much, and thank you, Judy, for
yeah, thank you, Betsy.
Night,
and
everyone.
thank you for your comment.
Yeah, and Lisa.
All right. Bye, everybody.